Yeah, I mean, dude, people are going to listen to it.
Obviously, they're going to listen to it. I mean, it's us, and
Well,
it's the Chiefs.
yeah, and we just won the Super Bowl.
We won the Super Bowl. You kidding me? You kidding me? The Super Bowl, bro?
Yeah, this will be a slam dunk. I mean, we can go over the season. We can go over all kinds of stuff. I mean, we can do something that celebrates the Chiefs, celebrates Always Sunny, maybe celebrates us.
I'm into that.
I know you are, bro.
Well, let's kick it. Hey, everybody, this is Austin. I'm here with my man Taylor. You may know us as at Real Bird Lawyer and at Taylor Witt. Sweet handle, bro.
Yeah, my alias.
Yeah, your alias. We decided to start a Chiefs podcast, so here's our Chiefs podcast.
Yeah, I mean, we're not going to spend this offseason quiet. You know, our boys just got the job done.
We won the Super Bowl.
They won the Super Bowl, and Austin, we can't not talk about the Chiefs every day. So let's just go ahead and talk about some football.
Football. Oh, football.
Run out and cut in.
Run out and cut in. But should I pop my shirt off?
Definitely should have popped that shirt off. Yeah, we're basically going to be making nonstop Always Sunny in Philadelphia references. For those of you that haven't seen the show, you should probably fire on down to Hulu. Go take care of that. It's it's the best show on TV.
It is, and the Chiefs are the best football team in the NFL. So we just thought maybe combine those two ideas, baby in the house situation.
House.
So that's what this is going to be like for 90 or so minutes until it just sort of ends.
Yeah, it's going to be Chiefs and Sunny and Chiefs full Sunny. You're really going to get a kick out of it. We're also going to break down 1 week from every week of last season, kind of start back in time. We're going to walk through it. We're going to talk about where our minds were at, what was going on with the Chiefs at that time, kind of really transport us back, because this season was so memorable that we just have to relive it from moment to moment.
It's going to be like the franchise, but instead of an award-winning YouTube production, it's going to be a podcast where you listen to us talk about, and we're going to go all the way back. We're going to go all the way back to training camp. We'll talk about, oh my God, Jacksonville.
Sure.
Is that where it all started? Jacksonville, the Jaguars?
It seems like forever ago, but
it really
was only 8 short months ago. No, like 6 short months ago.
Math is hard, bro. Don't do live math on air. That's a rookie mistake. Sure.
Yep, never again. But yeah, it's crazy to think that we were going into that. We'll go into it, but right now I'm thinking about training camp, and I'm thinking about all the turmoil that was going on. We had just overhauled the defense completely. Day one, we went in there and we dropped off all of our pass rush from the year before, and we completely rebuilt, starting with Spags. And it's wild to think that how little we actually knew about how this defense would perform.
It is, and it's also wild to think when the Chiefs were getting ready to show up to training camp, we didn't know if Chris Jones was going to be there.
Right.
And we'll get into that, obviously, when we talk about the offseason, whenever we decide to get into that. And, obviously there's going to be some question about whether Chris Jones is going to be a Chief next year. But there was a question about whether Chris Jones was going to be a Chief last year, right, when we were showing up to camp. And, does he fit into the system? Are we going to franchise tag him? And I mean, obviously, he didn't really have to report, and he came in and, Super Bowl. So
showed his love for the team too. He clearly has been such a team first guy throughout that whole process that I'm hoping we see the same thing this time around, but hard to say.
It is hard to say, and obviously we'll get into that, as we kind of get into free agency and the draft. But you know what? We don't have to talk about that yet, because we just won the Super Bowl.
We just won the Super Bowl.
We
How cool is that to say?
It's pretty cool to say. I'm going to keep saying it, over and over. I'm going to be using it a lot, I guess is what I'm saying.
Are you waking up in the morning saying we won the Super Bowl? Because I know I am.
I am, and as you know, I have a pretty lengthy commute, so I have a lot of time to digest podcasts and also watch Wasp. I've watched Wasp a lot. If you guys don't know what we're talking about, get out from under your rock. But
Yeah, I
there's a
mean, if you don't
great
know 2-3 Jet Trip Wasp, like I don't, I'm not sure what you're doing listening to the podcast, but I don't judge.
Yeah, and if you're listening to the podcast, you probably follow one or both of us on Twitter, and I've tweeted about this a lot. But there's that great NFL Films little 10-minute short. It's called Turning Point, and it's incredible. I can almost quote it line for line. I'm not going to do that. Just go watch it, press pause, whatever.
Can we talk for a second about the amazing coverage that the Super Bowl gets compared to every other game? I mean, obviously,
Yeah,
we
let's talk
knew
about it.
we knew a little bit about that, but we didn't really ever care about it. And now that we care about it, and we can go watch all these mic'd ups and all this cover, it's mind blowing to me.
Yeah, listen, so there's probably like, if we were to fire on down to YouTube right now, there's probably a video of some dumb play from the
Ugh,
Patriots win in Super Bowl 53. It's probably Tom Brady throwing a duck to
little
Rob
check down duck.
Gronkowski. He had like one catch in that game. And there's probably a 10-minute video breaking down that play.
You're
But
right.
who cares? Like who
Nobody.
who cares about that? But
Yeah,
the Chiefs won the Super Bowl. And so now we get to experience that. And instead of it being boring and bullshit, it's amazing.
it's dope football. It's awesome, Pat, and awesome. Everything that we're about is so much cooler than everything everyone else is about. It's the best.
We're going to need to load up Madden just so that we can run Wasp. And I have not played Madden since, as you know, like the week before actual football started.
Right.
It got us through like a rough little 2-week period there, kind of ended the preseason before the Jacksonville game. I mean, literally, I think I played Madden for like 2 weeks.
We were dying for football.
We were
Dying.
dying. We were dying. Um, and then we got football, and it was amazing. And now we have to wait for football again, but at least we can just soak in the vibes. We can bask. We
And
can
it's the
bask.
shortest off-season wait in our lives,
Oh, I mean, it's incredible.
which is great. That extra 2 weeks tacked on to the end there is,
Mm.
it doesn't feel like much, but it means everything.
Hmm. Were we talking about training camp? Do we want to like circle back to that? I
Yeah,
mean,
we can. Yeah, absolutely. So
we were
we
talking about
were,
Chris Jones and
and how
how,
he definitely was not a guarantee to start week one. It was
and
wild.
yeah, it was wild. But what was even wilder than that was the whole Tyreek Hill saga. And
Ugh.
I know, yeah, that whole debacle. So I know, obviously, this is our first episode, so a lot of you probably found us from Twitter, and I know that was really good for my follower count.
You
Um,
basically created yourself from the Tyreek Hill saga. So as much
that's
as it
true.
sucked, you have elevated to stardom based on his misfortunes.
Tyreek Hill made me, I would say, and I'm not trying to brag, but I'd say the second most famous Chiefs legal themed Twitter account after Seth Kaiser.
Sure.
I'd say it goes Seth, and then there's a big gap, and then me, and then,
And then there's an even bigger gap, and then there's no one after that bigger gap.
well, shout out to my law friends that are also part of the Chiefs Kingdom. They're around, but
Fair
yeah.
enough.
So Tyreek, that was crazy, and people are still talking about that, which is honestly, Taylor, a little bit frustrating.
They'll never stop talking about it, Austin. They'll never stop talking about it.
I was interacting with Dave Brown the other day on Twitter.
Ugh.
I know. For those of you who don't know, Dave, he is a lawyer.
Professional troll.
He is a professional troll, except he's, I don't know. When I think of trolling, by the way, like my philosophy on trolling is, and you're going to get a taste of this later, we're going to do a roast segment for you, which will be terrific. But my philosophy on trolling is that I at least want to have some facts to back up my trolling, right? Like
Yeah.
the laziest troll ever is that fucking Tom Brady gif of him waving the
Yeah. The
rings around.
rings. Yeah. Can't stand it.
Okay. Yeah, you didn't have to put any thought into that troll. You just fired a gif off, whatever. Now, I will say on the flip side, responding to people trolling me with the gif of Pat kissing the Lombardi,
Yes.
That's pretty satisfying.
I
So
also, speaking of responding to Patriots fans with kissing gifts, I also really enjoyed Tom Brady kissing his son. That's a really good one. Tom
I mean,
Brady
it's
kissing
classic.
Robert Kraft on the lips. Basically, Tom Brady kissing anyone but his wife on the lips will work every time.
I don't think I've ever seen Tom Brady kiss his
He
wife.
might not. That's a good point. We don't
That's
know.
fair. Well,
We're not gonna spread any rumors here, but we haven't ever seen it.
we haven't. So Tyreek Hill, obviously there was a long period of time where certainly the national media felt like Tyreek Hill was not, maybe wasn't even going to be on the team. We weathered that storm. I mean, we're
I mean,
kind of
maybe never
going,
play again.
well, yeah,
Like
going back in time to
the
draft
risk
night.
was as big as it gets. It was, the moment the audio tape came out, everyone was saying, "Oh, they're going to cut him." We had just gone through the Kareem stuff.
Ugh.
It was Tyreek Hill will never play in this league again. It was his second offense after the 2014 incident. I mean, it was as bad as it could possibly be.
Here's what I want to say about the Tyreek Hill thing, because obviously it all worked out for the best. He got a
You've said a
contract
lot about it
extension.
already. Yep.
I have said a lot about it. Go check out my pinned tweet. That's been my pinned tweet for like 9 months. That's my whole live tweet of the preliminary hearing. Here's what I want to say about Tyreek. Tyreek's son was with Tyreek at the Super Bowl. He was in the locker room. He was having an amazing time of his life, once in a lifetime experience for a little kid. I'm telling you, none of that happen
Be possible.
would be possible if some of the things that people still believe
Hmm.
to this day
Hmm.
were actually true. If any of that stuff had any merit to it at all, that simply would not have happened. It wouldn't have happened. So,
I'm not sure where it came from, but I have heard multiple people comment that he was granted full custody,
I mean, that would make
whatever that's worth.
sense, right? He's the one taking his kid to Miami
Yeah.
to watch the Super Bowl,
Yeah.
and we haven't heard from Crystal. So, anyway, Tyreek Hill, we can get into that maybe some more, but for now, he's the best wide receiver in the league, maybe.
Maybe. I mean, it's certainly in the conversation. If it's not him, he is right there neck and neck with, Hopkins and whoever else you want to name at the top of the list. But
I
he's
mean, who
incredible. Michael Thomas, probably
who
Michael
do well?
Thomas.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. I was gonna say who do you want to name, but I guess it starts and ends with Michael
I
Thomas,
mean,
and
Michael
then
Thomas, at least as far as he's incredible. He's
he
incredible.
is incredible. He is incredible. What do you
But
think of this Taysom Hill thing, by the way?
well, you know,
Just brief little
they
divergence.
Sean Payton said that he was Steve Young.
Hmm.
And that always kind of struck me as like, whoa, if he's Steve Young, like, what's he doing on the bench?
Right.
And then, there was the I think it was a tweet yesterday that said that Mohamed Sanu has completed more career passes than Taysom
Yes, he
Hill,
has.
and
Yeah.
it's just it kind of feels like if he was Steve Young, we would have seen it by now. I don't know. He's been on the field so much, and he's so good at so many things, but
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure quarterback's one of them.
He's an interesting piece, though, and maybe we'll have some time during the long off season to
Yeah,
unpack kind of some deeper philosophical thoughts about football. But I'm just really into the idea of Taysom Hill, and
same.
I'm just glad that he exists. Right? I would really love to have a Taysom Hill on the Chiefs. Although, if we ever took Pat Mahomes off the field, like what?
Why? Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, and maybe the
yeah,
Saints are going through a similar thing with Drew Brees.
sure.
Maybe if they had, Derek Carr out there instead of Drew Brees, maybe Taysom Hill would be the starter. Like maybe it's just the fact that they have one of the all-time greats and they can't justify giving Taysom Hill too many passing opportunities. However, when he's had them, he just seems like he's playing quarterback, but he's not a quarterback.
No, he's like yeah, I don't know what he is. I guess like Lamar Jackson, if Lamar Jackson could pass.
He's certainly versatile, and he would certainly be a guy that I would die to be able to have on my football team. I just don't know if I'd want him throwing passes.
No, I mean probably not.
But
But
blocking punts and catching passes and running
sure.
around and tackling guys, I mean, he's their best special teams player by a mile.
Oh yeah, for sure. So Taysom Hill, sure. Well, we got a little bit off on a tangent
Yeah,
there,
well,
but that's fine.
we'll go on tangents.
We talked about, well, yeah, I mean, that's how you get the best stuff, right? That's where it comes from. So we talked about Chris Jones. We talked about Tyreek Hill. Now we did not go to training camp this year, right?
Not this year. We went.
We went
We
in
knew
20.
what was
We did.
coming with Pat, and you and I were. I don't want to say we were the earliest adopters of Pat Mahomes as the next great savior of mankind, but like we were sure close.
We were pretty close. I mean, we went to the basketball game, the charity basketball game in
In
May of 2018.
correct, We
with
had
our
our
Pat jerseys
with our
on.
Pat jerseys, and we must have been, two of the first whatever.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, we were walking around with Pat jerseys before anyone knew he was any good at all, other than the people that had watched him play football, and they knew he was for sure really good.
Remember when people were making fun of Brett Veach for saying that Pat Mahomes was the best player he'd ever
Yes.
seen? He
Okay.
said it in reference to before he had ever started a game. He was
Yes.
like, back when I saw him, when I seen him throw that ball,
I was like, oh my God.
that was Brett Veach, and also Adrian Peterson, and also everyone that has ever laid eyes on Pat Mahomes.
He's incredible, and we could just do an hour every week for the rest of our lives gushing over how amazing Pat is, and you and I would literally never get tired of
I mean, we did that for
it. Yeah. Every day.
months
Every
and
day.
months leading up to the first season, and
Yes.
then each month after that, and now he's won a Super Bowl.
It's
So
been a dream come true. It really is. And I know that there are some people that could never have envisioned the Chiefs having a star quarterback ever in our whole lives. And then they just go out, and the first time they really reach for one, boy does it work out.
one of the other things that we were going to talk about with the training camp storylines, which really has come full circle now that we've won the Super Bowl, is the way the season before ended.
Yes.
And
The AFC Championship game.
plenty of people have talked about this. Rainey Gisilieri wrote a great article about this on The Ringer. But just the parallels between the 2014-2015 Royals and then the 2018-2019 Chiefs are
It's
really,
spooky.
it is eerie to think about. But you kind of had that sense. What's weird about it though is, and we've talked about this before off the air, because we talk about football and Chiefs football
Constantly.
literally all the time. But this season, really right up until the very end, I mean, even into the playoffs, it never really had that same sense of inevitability that the 2015 Royals had.
Good point.
I mean, really from when Pat tweaked his ankle in week 1, we'll talk about the Jacksonville game probably next week and
Mhm.
go through each game of the season. And Tyreek got hurt in that game too. And there never really was the unstoppable juggernaut that we knew the 2015 Royals were and would be, and ended up being the whole year. The Chiefs never really got there until they went down 24 to nothing against Houston. And then kind of from that point on, obviously they had to rally in each of the playoff games and, overcome double digit deficits. But once they got rolling,
Yeah, the stories are pretty similar when you compare the playoff runs.
oh, for
For
sure.
sure, both playoff runs are almost identical. The regular season, now the 15 Royals did have the Alex Gordon injury when we had to go out and get Zobrist, and that was kind of, that obviously Alex Gordon is not Pat, but it was the only time that that team really faced adversity all year. They were far and away the best team in baseball for most of the run that year, and the Chiefs were never far and away. The Ravens were always the team that the Chiefs and the Patriots to an extent until we, exercise that demon. But
Right.
the Ravens were always the team. And the Royals were really the team in 15 in the regular season. But you're absolutely right that once those playoffs started, in both times, a heartbreaking loss the year before when you're inches from the place that you've never been, or at least hadn't been in 30 or 50 years. And then the next season when the playoffs start, you're down. You've got all this adversity in the playoffs. You overcome it time and time and time again. We're not just talking about one big comeback for each team.
No.
We're talking about historically two of the greatest postseason runs in sports history as far as comebacks go, and they happen
Yeah.
in the same city within 5 years of each other.
It's amazing.
It's amazing, and both to break an extended drought. I mean, it just couldn't have been more amazing to be a Kansas City sports fan in this last 5 years.
It's been unbelievable,
Unbelievable,
as
Salvi.
Salvi would
Shout
say.
out. Yep.
Yeah, right. Shout out to our baseball past.
Yes.
But what's amazing about it is that, I mean, what's going to be really interesting to talk about 6 months from now is how the Chiefs come into the season as champions. Because with the Royals, we knew,
Yeah. It was
you
all
know,
going. It was all falling
it
apart.
was a one-time thing. It wasn't going to happen. Maybe you thought maybe they could run it back in 2016, but that was for sure going to be really the absolute end of the road. And with the Chiefs, it's just getting started.
Yep.
I mean, it's going to be a wild ride.
It is, and it's crazy that the sentiment to be a Chiefs fan during now compared to the sentiment of being a Royals fan. Like it just, I mean, it's entirely different. The whole world is open to the Chiefs right now.
Yep.
It's wild. And that overhaul, the defensive overhaul, and we always talk about the offense and how crazy Pat is and how great Tyreek and Kelsey are and everything. But when you think about losing Barry, Ford, Houston, Steven Nelson, who I guess isn't that big of a loss, Alan Bailey, Ron Parker, Orlando Scandrick, Frank Zombo. I mean, we lost basically the entire defense was let go, other than 3 or 4 guys.
Yeah.
And to bring in these guys that just all hit, all of them. I mean, from Bashad Breeland to Okafor and Agba before they got hurt, Clark and Matthew. It's Thornhill,
Charvarius
Fenton,
Ward.
Ward, Mike
I mean,
Pennell.
he
I mean,
was last year, but
Terrell
obviously, I
Suggs.
mean,
We didn't
yeah.
make a bad move. Brett Veach is probably the MVP of this team.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it really is extraordinary to think about. And even, going back to the Royals parallel, like the Royals won the World Series that year, but like Johnny Cueto was their big acquisition and he kind of sucked. Like he had some good games and some really good games in the playoffs, but like, I think his ERA was close to 5.
Oh, his regular season, Johnny Cueto wasn't very good at all.
And Ben Zobrist was amazing.
He was.
Shout out to that guy.
Did
He's
you
been
hear
doing.
that he is probably retiring? I heard
Oh,
that
I
today.
did not.
Yeah,
Happy
he's home. He's not picked out a new team, and he probably won't. So happy retirement.
trails to you, Ben Zobrist.
He was great.
Forever Royal.
Yeah, forever Royal, and Royals and Cubs back to back. He had a nice little run there.
He sure did. But to your point, I mean, it's amazing how many of those moves hit and how many of those moves were pretty controversial at the time that they were carried out. I mean, there were people ready to, and we'll get into this when we get into the season recap and go in kind of game by game. But man, I'd tell you, 4 or 5 weeks into the season, hey,
Oh man, it didn't look pretty at all.
it did not. It really didn't.
You had a sick Frank Clark running around, not doing anything. I mean, he was public enemy number one for a while.
He
around here.
was.
We couldn't stop the run at all, and our the cost on Frank Clark is enormous.
It was.
And for that to be what looked like a complete swing and a miss, I mean, but then obviously between his sickness and figuring out the Spags defense and him ending all 3 playoff games with a sack, worked out pretty well.
Frank the Shark Clark, man.
Frank the Shark Clark.
Sharking around, blood in the water.
Or as he said during the broadcast, Frank the Clark Shark.
Oh, Mitch.
Love Mitch.
He's amazing. So, do you want to do a mailbag, Taylor?
Let's do a mailbag. So, I've got a pretty complicated system here. So the tweets go into 3 sections according to how important I think the thing looks. Okay. Now the least important stuff, I'm going to delete that. If it's important, they're going to send it in again, right? The middle important stuff, I quote tweet that back to Twitter at myself. So I buy myself a couple of days. And the most important stuff, that gets answered. Although, something, Austin, I actually delete most of that too. The mail doesn't stop.
It doesn't stop.
So
Carol!
that's possibly the greatest scene in television history.
I agree.
Charlie and Mac in the mailroom is top notch.
You're gonna see. I wish there was a way to just incorporate GIFs into a podcast, because later when we get into the roast, it's gonna be real Charlie throwing his hands up with the crazy wall.
Yes.
I'll just say I printed off, and it's 2020, so this was a big step. I printed off some notes on paper, and it is 5 pages long, and I think I need to kind of just like staple it up on my wall.
Do you have any thumbtacks with some colored yarn you can attach some stuff to? I mean,
some colored yarn. Yes, that would be good.
Get into it. Yeah.
Yes, that will be fine.
So we've got our first question. These are submitted to us on Twitter. Austin had a post where he just asked people for some questions. So if you're listening to this and you'd like to ask us a question, basically, if you just tell us it's for the mailbag, we'll get to it, or at least we'll try to. Sorta Rican, who I really like that name, Casey Sorta Rican, asked us over under for Mahomes' entire career: touchdown, passing yards, interceptions, rushing yards, playoff wins, Super Bowls, MVPs, basically the whole gamut of a quarterback's resume. I know everyone's the biggest Mahomes fan they've ever met, but like, you and I are about as drinking the Kool-Aid on this kid as you possibly ever could.
Sure.
And I can't really come up with. I was trying to think to myself, okay, what's my realistic projections for what I think if his career goes the way I think it does.
Oh, same.
And it's so hard
It is.
because my heart and my brain are telling me that he's going to shatter every record, and you can't project injuries or anything like that. So if we just think that he's going to play forever, I mean, honestly, I couldn't even come up with where I thought he would end up on some of these. But
Well,
no,
let's
yeah,
start with touchdown passes
sure,
because that's the big one. And I just pulled up the list here of the all-time touchdown leaders.
right.
Obviously, Drew Brees is it right now. He
He
has
and Brady are neck and neck.
547.
Yeah,
Tom Brady at 541. Peyton Manning at 539. Brett Favre at 508, and then there's a big
huge.
drop off.
Right.
Dan Marino is fifth with 420. And Dan Marino, by the way, when he retired, 420 was it. And
Yeah.
it was it by, I think, number two was John Elway, who we'll talk
Hmm.
about later. John Elway had 300 touchdown passes. So Dan Marino had 25% more touchdowns than the guy in second place. Dan Marino was
Ridiculous.
amazing.
He was amazing.
Um, but those four guys on top, I mean, even throwing Brett Favre into that mix,
Hmm.
those guys played in a different era. I mean,
Hmm.
like they definitely benefited from the direction of the league moving towards a more pass heavy league, but they didn't benefit for it their entire careers. And Mahomes
Will
will, and he's also really good. Like,
extremely.
I mean, the best quarterback ever.
And don't you get the feeling that the league, if it's going to change during Mahomes' tenure, is only going to get more pass
Yes.
friendly? I mean, I just don't foresee
Yes.
it becoming harder. So
Yes.
that being said, if the records are in the 550s right now, like I literally feel like it could be 1,000 for Pat. I just think that if he plays 15 to 20 healthy years, he's just going to start. I don't know. I feel that he is not close to his best right yet.
Yeah. Well, 1,000, he'd have to do 20
20.
seasons of 50 touchdowns, right? Or
Yeah.
no, that would be
Yeah.
yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Well,
Good.
we're doing math.
Yeah, you did it.
I nailed it. Hey, how about it? That seems a little high,
It does
but
until you think that he probably is going to have a season of 75 or 80. Don't you think?
I mean, he definitely is going to have a season of 60. I really do believe that for sure. I mean, the single season record is 55, right?
Yeah.
Manning in
Yeah.
2013.
Yeah.
So he for sure is going to break that, and probably is going to break it like next year. Or I mean, this year, 2020.
Right.
He probably is going to do it soon. I mean, honestly, the guy's now won a Super Bowl, so like, what else is there to do
Just go out
other
there
than
and
win more Super Bowls? But
right.
obviously, on the way, I tweeted about this way back, and you and I talked about this. What's funny about Manning and Brady's 50 touchdown seasons is that they were both trying to set the touchdown record.
Correct. Correct.
Brady did it in 2007. It was right after Spygate. Bill Simmons, whom I hate, but Bill
Yes.
Simmons kept talking about the FUTDs.
Hmm.
And it's like, okay, we're up 30 in this game. We're still going to throw. We're going to go for it on fourth down.
Hmm.
We're going to set the league on fire to pay them back for punishing us for cheating. Make it seem like it was everybody else's fault. 18-1. Shout out Eli Manning, my
Yeah.
boy. And then in Peyton's season, Peyton was 38, and Peyton really up until probably Brady's second half, where he starts winning Super Bowl IV, Super Bowl V, Super Bowl VI.
Uh-huh.
You could make an argument that Manning still had the better career than Brady.
Agreed.
He had the ring and he had the regular season numbers
MVPs
over Brady.
and he was clearly also, I think, when you watch the two, there
Oh, of
was
course.
nothing about Peyton Manning that made you think that he was a worse quarterback than Tom Brady.
So then, once Brady, certainly after 2007, when Brady starts putting up elite passing numbers for the
Hmm.
first time in his
Ever.
career, we'll probably do a future segment where we talk about Tom Brady as a
Oh, I've
system
got
QB.
tons of Brady stuff ready. So
Perfect. Well,
yeah.
that's terrific. We'll have to save that for another time. But Manning then, Manning goes to Denver and he's not going to catch Tom Brady in rings. He's in his late 30s.
Hmm.
So what can he do to kind of recapture a piece of the GOAT conversation? Set the single season touchdown record.
And the
And
passing or the yards record in the same
and the
season.
yards record in the same season. And that's what he does. I mean, the Broncos were throwing so much in that
Yep.
season. So then Pat Mahomes comes along in his first season, and just being Pat Mahomes throws 50 touchdowns, just kind of
Casual
like
50.
casual 50. We were not we were not trying to set the touchdown record.
Hmm.
I think there will come a time, maybe sooner than we think, because he's already won a Super Bowl, where they're just going to let Pat have a season where he just shatters every record. And I kind of thought you were being a little bit ridiculous when you're talking about 75, 80
I
touchdowns.
honestly am not. I am
I
I am dead serious. I think
yeah.
that this kid is capable of scoring every drive. I mean, it's just he's unstoppable.
So if we set the number, Breeze is at 547. If
Yeah,
we set the number at 700, you'd take the over.
I would take the over on a 700 career touchdown passes for
I
Pat.
think I
I
would
would.
take the over as well.
I
I
would.
think I would too.
And
I think
even
that's
if
where
you
you would.
project with Marino going 100 over Elway's record, I mean, it's really not that preposterous to think
It's
that
not.
Pat's that much better than everyone who's come before him. And I just feel that there's nothing in me that feels comfortable picking an under on Pat.
Yeah,
I
I
just can't.
completely agree with that. Well, and if we're being realistic here, the way that Vegas doesn't have these over unders. I wish they
Sure,
did,
I do
because
too.
in 20 years
But
we could
killing.
make a mint. We could
Yeah,
make a
that's right.
boatload.
We could.
Uh, but if realistically, if Vegas were setting odds on something like this, they would set the over under at, like, I don't know, 500, something
Yeah, they wouldn't
stupid
even
like
have him
that.
breaking the record.
Oh, we'd have something. We would be slamming it if it
Yes.
existed.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And the same
So
goes for, we're talking touchdowns here, but
yeah,
this is
yeah,
passing
passing
yards,
yards.
this is
Yep.
interceptions, this is even playoff wins in Super Bowls.
Yeah.
I
So I mean, that's the only part of it that maybe is a separate conversation, is the Super Bowls.
Sure,
And
because more goes into it than just Pat. All the other
s-
stuff is just his.
6 Super Bowls is a lot of Super Bowls.
It is.
Bill Belichick is amazing,
He
and Tom
is.
Brady is fine, and Josh McDaniels is a bitch.
Yes.
But six
All
Super
true.
Bowls is a lot of Super Bowls to win. But if you look at what Brady had going for him, and I don't want to go on a rant here, but I hate when people compare, say, Pat to Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay, he wasn't he first of all, he didn't start until he was 26. Okay,
Right.
Pat started at 23. So that makes
Right.
a huge difference,
Huge.
because those are your peak physical years.
Yep.
And when you're able to get to your mental peak, or at least to a point where you're better than everybody else, which is where Pat is at such a young age, it gives you an unbelievable edge. I mean, look at like what Mike Trout is doing in baseball.
Hmm.
When you start off early and you're elite at a young age, your potential to rewrite the record books across the board, not just passing numbers,
Hmm.
but playoff wins, Super Bowl wins. You have it all at your disposal. He's now the second youngest quarterback to win a Super Bowl.
Yep.
He's the youngest quarterback to win a Super Bowl and a regular season MVP award. He's the only person to do that. So, I mean, if you were to say, if you gave me 4 Super Bowls,
I'm
I would
slamming that over.
I would take the over.
Yeah.
If you gave me 6,
Mm,
I mean,
hard. It's hard.
we're getting closer,
Yeah.
to it being a difficult ask, right?
And we do have to remember that you and I are also gigantic Chiefs fans, and
Well,
it
of
is
course.
and it is hard for us to separate that. But I do think that we're intellectually capable of separating it, and
Yeah, of
and
course.
the pure gap between Pat and the next best. That's part of the reason that I
Oh,
see
yeah.
the dominance is because if you're considering the next best quarterback in the NFL Russell Wilson or whoever the case may be. I don't you pick Lamar or it's just Deshaun. No one is in his conversation.
Right,
No one. And it's
right.
not even and now maybe here in the next couple seasons or whatever, maybe somebody comes along and they look just like Pat did and they come out and they're throwing the crazy passes and they got a rocket arm and all that stuff. And maybe we'll be forced to say, "Oh, he's not the only one that's going to be fighting for these Super Bowls here for the next decade." But until I see them, like it's Pat until it's not Pat.
Right.
And I just don't I can't I'm going to say 7 Super Bowls. I'm going to say he gets one more than Brady.
I like that. And It's gonna be one more than Brady because Tom Brady's done winning Super Bowls,
It
right?
is.
That's he's toast.
Oh, he's
All right.
cooked.
That was a great question.
It
Thank you for
was.
that.
Yes,
Casey
thank
Puerto
you.
Rican, you
Yes,
gave us a lot
absolutely.
of material to go with there.
Yeah.
So this is from a man, Peter Yadrich at Peter Y Golf. If you were a potato, how would you most prefer to be served? Please read the question carefully to make sure you're answering from the correct perspective. So you actually already answered
I
this on
did.
Twitter.
I
So
did.
what was your answer for
I
the pod?
said that, like any rich potato, I would prefer to be served by a butler, or if all cases being equal, some sort of intellectually enhanced dog with a talking dog with a bow tie, something crazy like that. That's how I would prefer to be served.
Hmm. I I read this more as a
Yes.
style of potato.
Yes,
I
that's how he
appreciate
intended
you.
it.
I
Yes.
appreciate you getting real weird with it.
Right,
I
exactly.
appreciate that.
Yeah, block
Uh,
the wind while I roast this bone.
I would probably. I'm just gonna say mashed. I'm boring. Turkey
Oh,
stands
Alex
out.
Smith, come
Turkey stands
on,
out.
kid.
Obviously,
Mashed.
turkey stands out. It's a good
Jeez.
standout dish.
All
Let's go to the next one. That was a
right,
good
all right.
question though, Peter. I
All
appreciate
right,
that.
so Ian Freeman at the Philosophian asks, yeah,
The
sure.
philosophian. That's great.
Yeah,
I was a philosophy major in college, so
you
I
were.
appreciate that.
Minus Travis and Pat, what player would you want to drink with? When was the last time? Oh, and then yeah, also follow up question: when was the last time the Chiefs won their last game of the year? I'll
Yeah,
hit that
about
one
2 weeks
first because
ago.
I answered that on well, but the last time he meant before this time, but it
Oh,
was 2014 when they went 9-7, didn't make the playoffs, and won their Week 17 game.
was that against the
It
Chargers?
was against the Chargers, and it was started
Uh-huh.
by
Chase
Chase Daniel.
Daniel.
Exactly right.
Hmm.
So, but minus Travis and Pat, who would you most want to drink with? There are so many great personalities on this team.
There are. There are.
My first thought was Frank, because I think any night out with Frank Clark would be insane. Would
Oh,
be
it would be
something that I
insane.
could never ever ever forget. Um, he's probably my number one answer.
I would say that's a good answer. I
Sure.
like that. I'm gonna go with I'm gonna go with Badger. I think
Ah,
Badger would be I Badger probably shouldn't be around alcohol. I
yeah.
feel
I was
like
just gonna say, you guys are getting into a fight if you go out drinking with Honey Badger. That's for sure.
he's got a lot. He's got an well, so does Frank though. I
So
mean,
does Frank. We're getting into
they
yeah.
they both have an edge already that I feel like would really get. That was what was so fun about the the Pat Super Bowl parade was that he was clearly wasted and it
He
was
was.
hilarious
Yes.
because it was so
Well, Pat's
strange and
so buttoned up.
he is very buttoned up. He's very Andy Reid.
He
Yeah,
basically is as good at answering questions as he is at playing quarterback.
I know, which is impossible, but
It
he
is.
is.
And to see him cut loose, it was a sight to behold. I loved it.
It sure was. You know what? I'm gonna amend my answer though. I'm gonna say Anthony Sherman.
Yeah, I was thinking
Locking it
him.
in, locking it
Yes.
in.
Yeah,
I'm
he's
gonna go with the
awesome.
sausage for sure.
Yeah, I love it.
So we got a question here from Vitamin J, longtime follower and friend of the podcast. Why Patrick Mahomes is a better Patrick Lavon Mahomes. Patrick Lavon Mahomes is a better QB than John Elway and Tom Brady. Well, Vitamin J, stay tuned. We're going to talk about John Elway here in a little bit. Tom Brady, I feel like we kind of covered that already.
Sure.
Um,
I plan on going into that in
oh,
another roast later
yeah.
on. So
Well, perfect.
we definitely have plenty of material, especially for those two quarterbacks.
Patrick Mahomes is the best there is. End of story.
End of story. Gary Pergande at Gondfather
I like that.
asks, yes, I do too. We got some good handles on the old Twitter
We sure
follows.
do. We sure do.
I would love some super boring talk on how the cap actually works year to year. Some of the things that teams do with contracts to give themselves wiggle room. I definitely understand where he's coming from, and I think that of all the football concepts that are difficult, which there are tons of them,
Oh,
the
tons.
salary cap is certainly one that is probably more nebulous than it needs to be. There's probably a lot of um, unexplained and quirky things about it that if they, if it was me running the sports league, I probably would make it a little bit more cut and dry. Um, I don't really know if we've got a lot of uh, prepared remarks on the salary cap. I know.
Yeah, what I'll say about the salary cap is it's going to be number one. Brett Veach has repeatedly referenced his cap team. Like, I
Yes,
think he has more than one guy whose sole job it is to navigate the cap,
he
which
certainly
gives
does.
you an idea of how nebulous it is and how important it is to have people who aren't hosting a podcast figure out your cap situation for you.
Yeah,
The other thing, just to respond to this, he said super boring talk. I actually think the cap is super interesting.
I do too.
But this new CBA is obviously going to have a huge impact on the cap going forward, and it probably is going to be something we talk about quite a bit when we're getting closer to the draft, when we get into the new league year, when Patrick Mahomes is eligible for an extension. So that might be something that we revisit.
We certainly have some discussion about the possible quarterback only cap that they've discussed, which
Whew.
it seems like the perfect timing if you're a Chiefs fan.
Yeah, I mean, that would be completely unfair. So I really hope they bump that through, and then we can up that over under for Super Bowl wins to like
So a million, however many years he
15.
wants
Yeah,
to play.
right.
Yeah,
Exactly. Exactly.
right.
Harry Lee at Johnny Joe 1083. He just writes, Chiefs, Mahomes, Philip Rivers is a backup. I appreciate that tweet. Not really a question there, but it's a good solid one. I'll roll into this next one here. Platinum Sombrero. What beer would you be chugging on top of a parade bus? Also, top three KC athletes to survive on a desert island with. So, knock that beer question out for our listeners who are not familiar
Yeah.
with your.
So for those that don't know me IRL, I've got this strange, I call it an allergy to beer. I'm not quite sure what the deal is, but I have tried many times, and beer just does not sit down with me. I throw it up. So I have gone my entire adult life as a hard alcohol drinker, and no regrets there. But I've certainly been offered my fair share of free beers that I've had to deny and tell that exact story.
More for me. I would be drinking. This is such a basic bitch answer, but I would say Boulevard Wheat. And I live in Colorado now. So when I go out and I find Boulevard Wheat in the wild here in enemy territory, it really is a nice feeling. I watched the AFC Championship game this year in Crested Butte, Colorado, which is a mountain town about 4 hours west of Denver and southwest of Denver. It's in the middle of nowhere. But there's a Chiefs bar there called the Last Steep, and
Shout
they
out.
had Boulevard Wheat on tap. It was amazing. It was such a great experience just to be able to, and of course, watch the Chiefs
Now,
win the AFC Championship game. Yes,
as a non-experienced drinker, is bully wheat chuggable?
uh, it is definitely, well, any beer is chuggable if
Sure,
you have the
if
right
you chug
mindset,
it.
right?
Yeah, that's good. That's good. That
And
should
we
be a
got a
bumper
lot
sticker.
of. I am not personally a beer chugger, but I gotta say we got a lot of champion beer chuggers on the team. So, second part of this question: top three KC athletes to survive on a desert island with.
Hmm,
I thought about this quite a bit,
same.
and um, my number one draft choice. Maybe we should draft. Should we
Yeah.
draft
Ooh, I like
this?
that. You're gonna take my
Okay.
guy, but you go first.
Well, I'm going to take Pat off the
Okay.
board first because
Okay.
he's a perfect
Yeah,
human,
he is.
and
You know he
and
would come up with some crazy thing to help you survive that no one else would have
well,
ever thought
and if I die, what a
of.
way to go, right?
Yeah, you would actually wish to be stranded on a desert island with Pat
Yeah,
anyway, so that's
right.
that's good.
Exactly. All right,
Uh,
you're on the
all right,
clock.
are we snaking?
Yeah, we'll snake.
All
So
right,
you get
so
two, and then I get one, and
so my number one draft choice would be Bo Jackson.
ooh, that's a good one.
I think that Bo would be able to survive any sort of physical. Now, obviously, we're taking peak physical Bo Jackson,
Yeah,
and
not
you
not
know,
2020 Bo
no,
Jackson.
no. Although shout out to Bo, but yeah, I think Bo would be up for just about anything that was thrown his way, and built like a tree trunk, and was fast, and I mean, obviously, he is one of the all-time greatest athletes, and he was my easy number one.
So it's up you. You're up again. That's a good choice. I like that.
Thanks. Yep. I thought long and hard about this. Three KC athletes. So then I was going. Do I go? Basically, Royals and Chiefs are the only KC athletes that I really have a pool to draw from.
Right.
I
Sure.
don't. I don't know if there's anyone on Sporting that would be worth this, or if what other teams we had. But I was thinking along the same bow lines, and I really, really thought Salvi would be a awesome guy to have on a desert island with. Now he
Sure.
might not necessarily be survival, picking him for survival, but for sure picking him for a good time.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And he did survive on an island, not a deserted island, but I mean, all
Yeah,
those Latin
he's
American guys.
he's more used to it than I would be, that's for sure.
Sure, the tropical climate. So it's back to me, right?
It is for 2.
Then do I get two?
Your
Okay.
last 2. Yeah.
So I'm gonna go a little bit unconventional here. I'm gonna count him as a KC athlete because he did wear a uniform for the
Ned
Kansas City
Yost.
Royals. Ha! You're exactly right.
I mean, that was brilliant. I would have
Well, I
definitely
mean,
gone with Ned. He's amazing.
yes, Ned. Aside from the time that he fell out of the tree
I
and
I
almost killed
added that
himself.
to his positives.
Yeah, well, sure. He survived,
Yeah, right,
so
right.
he's a survivor.
Yes.
He brought us a championship. Not the sharpest tool in the shed necessarily, but not as dumb as people give him credit for either. I mean,
No.
and definitely a survivor. So I would take Ned, and then I think for my last pick, I'd have to go with another Chief, and I think I'd have to go with Tyreek Hill.
God, that was my pick.
Really?
Yeah, it was my pick for sure. You kidding me?
So,
Racing Bo and Tyreek Hill every day? Oh, it'd be
yeah.
amazing.
Well, you would definitely get in super good shape. Tyreek's got a lot of good, workouts that you could, use to kind of
Mhm.
stay fit. Plus, I feel like, he's so fast. If there was any kind of danger on this island, whether it be a smoke monster a la
Right.
Lost or
Yeah.
whatever it would be. I mean, I just feel like his speed, as on the football field, could get you out of a lot of sticky situations.
He would be ready for it, man. That's for sure. That was a great pick. And although my 3 were Bo, Salvi, and Reek, I'm gonna then call an audible and pick Travis Kelsey. I
Nice.
think that I'm going with the party team.
Sure.
And with between Salvi and Trav, it's gonna be a good time every time until we all die. So that seems like a pretty decent triple for me to survive on an island with. So
Sure.
your 3 are Pat, Ned,
Ned.
Pat and Ned together would kill me.
Pat, Ned, and Tyreek. Yep.
Tyreek, that's great.
Yeah, it's
Pat
perfect.
and Ty are just going to be running go routes all the time, and Ned's just going to be talking about their domes, and you're just gonna. That's
Yeah,
going to
he's
be
gonna be up in a tree somewhere hunting, and
yeah,
it'll be great.
yeah. Shout out to Platinum Brero with that amazing question.
Yeah, it's
We
great.
also had Douglas Dowell at Douglas Dowell JD ask us Chris Jones and Pat, and assuming no new CBA, pipe dream or just got to do it anyway. I mean, $1 million question right now. I think that um, it- my gut tells me that I don't know how they can let Chris Jones go.
Yeah,
But I mean, they kind of have to. I don't know.
yeah.
It's a perfect question. It's one that I've gone back and forth with a lot on, and I do think it's possible, but I also think it's pretty unlikely.
So there's definitely gonna be a new CBA. The
Yes.
question is just when it's going to happen, and the question is how much it's going to shake things up. And I think it's really interesting for the Chiefs because you look at some of the teams around the league, specifically the Dallas Cowboys
Yes.
are the team that I'm thinking of. There are a lot of teams that, and if, look at the Los Angeles Rams too. There are some teams out here that might just be bad and not know what they're doing, or it could be that they have a pretty good idea of what the new CBA is going to look like. I think the Jerry Jones and certainly Stan Kroenke and Les Snead, the general manager of the Rams. I mean, I feel like those are two organizations that are pretty plugged into the happenings of the league as a whole,
Hmm.
kind of power brokers.
Hmm.
Certainly, you would expect at least the owners of those two organizations to have quite a bit of influence over the CBA talks. I kind of think that the new CBA might go way, way up. In which case, bring the whole crew back. We'll run it back. We'll win a
Right.
bunch of Super Bowls.
Yeah.
All
Give
that.
Sammy 30 million a year. Who cares?
Yeah, sure. Why not? We'll do it. That was a great question. So at Steiner Hereford, Steven Steiner, why don't the 49ers get the same heat as the Bears for passing over Mahomes? Reminder, they took Solomon Thomas over Patrick
Who?
Mahomes.
Who?
Yeah, yeah, right,
Just
exactly.
say waitress.
Just say waitress. I know they were in the Super Bowl, but they got beat by the man they missed on. I think, I mean, obviously the part of the reason is because they didn't take a different quarterback. So the Bears are always going to get roasted because they took a quarterback and it was Mitch Trubisky. And there are a lot of bad picks before Pat. I could pull the draft up,
I've
but
got it.
just off the top of my head, John Ross for
Yes.
the Bengals. He's
Ninth.
on my dynasty team in our dynasty league, so I am hoping he maybe pans out. Um, but John Ross, you had Corey Davis.
Corey Davis was fifth to the Titans.
Ugh, ugh. Why
Yes.
didn't the Titans take Pat Mahomes? I
Yes.
mean,
Right.
you could ask this question about any team that picked before us that didn't take Patrick Mahomes. The Browns, did the Browns take Garrett
Miles
that year?
Garrett. Yep.
Yep,
Number one overall. Yep.
sure.
Which, I mean, fine pick, but he's not Pat.
Yeah, I mean, he's a great player, but and frankly, compared to Corey Davis
Yeah.
and
It's
John
one of the
Ross,
better picks for sure.
yeah, right,
Y-
absolutely.
Yeah, it's hard because, like you said, the only team above us that picked a quarterback is the one that gets roasted. But the question is totally valid. You
It
pick a
is
you pick a
valid.
defensive end third overall with Pat on the board, and you've got all these guys. Even the Panthers that picked CMC, one of the greatest running backs that we've seen, are probably sitting there going, "Man, I bet we'd be in better shape if we had picked up Pat." And even though
Oh,
they
for
had
sure they would
Cam,
be.
it's just a very the Chargers with Mike Williams, the Jags with Leonard Fournette, who's good. It's valid that they all should take criticism for it, but the easy target is the team that picked the quarterback and also picked the bad quarterback. They didn't
Yeah,
pick Deshaun up there at 2. If they
no,
had picked Deshaun and we had gone with Pat 8 picks later, everyone would have been like, "Man, too bad they picked the wrong guy there." But like, man, they picked Mitch.
yeah.
That's been as bad as you can get.
And honestly, if they had picked Deshaun, we might have been playing them in the Super Bowl this year.
Certainly,
Like I
yes,
think Matt Nagy
yes,
with Deshaun Watson, like
and
Deshaun
that
Watson with a
defense.
real coach and a real defense,
Yeah, man, for
I
sure.
I mean they would be a very scary team.
He would make Taylor Gabriel look like Will Fuller.
Sure, yeah,
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 yeah, legit. That's a great question, and I do think that all of those teams share some heat, but clearly the Bears are jumping in front of that bullet. Which play will be more? This is from Andrew Whiteside at OU under SAS. Which play will be more iconic? Rose Bowl shift right or Wasp? And I think that in general, the one that we've clearly seen now, a good 10 days after the Super Bowl, has been Wasp. That's the one that everyone's going to point back. That's the one people are getting tattoos of. That's the one that went into Madden. Wasp is the more iconic play, but boy, it's going to be tough for me to shake remembering Rose Bowl shift right. That was a fancy play on fourth down near the goal line. It was ballsy play.
yeah. So I mean, it's definitely Wasp here as we sit 10 days after the Super Bowl, both because it was later in the game, which obviously adds to the level of urgency and makes it more iconic. And then, of course, because NFL Films did a 10-minute video about it, which everyone in Kansas City has watched like a million times. I honestly, every day, I have been waiting for them to do one on Rose Bowl
Hmm.
because it seems it's literally the perfect material for an NFL Films segment. You can go back into the history of football, which is something that NFL Films always does an amazing job of.
Yeah, the best.
You've got really ripe material interview wise. I'm sure you saw. I think it was Kelsey said that they almost didn't run it because
Couldn't
Watkins couldn't
spin.
couldn't spin, which is ridiculous.
It
He's
is
an
ridiculous.
NFL wide receiver and he can't spin
He's
around.
a
Come
world
on.
class athlete and kept
Yeah.
running into the running back when they would spin.
Hilarious.
Yeah, I bet he
I've
can't
been
dance.
waiting for them to do that, and I'm a little bit disappointed that they haven't done it yet. I think that definitely could help close the gap a little bit. What's so funny to me is, when Damian scored the go-ahead touchdown, I can't remember who said this, but the Chiefs were going to go for it if that was short. Like they were going to go for it. They could have kicked a field goal to tie it
Yeah.
2020. They were going to go for the touchdown on fourth and an inch from the goal
Mhm.
line. And whatever play they were going to run there was going to become the most iconic play
Yeah,
in Chiefs history.
in NFL history.
Yeah,
Yeah.
as it stands, we'll just have to go with Wasp.
Yep. Yep. That is a great question. Yep.
That King Cole, that underscore King Cole. I know a lot of people either don't want to talk about it as a possibility, but do you think bringing Barry back as an addition to our secondary would be beneficial as long as he's not asking for too much, obviously? I think football wise, football wise and non-football wise. I mean, Eric Berry was a big part of the Chiefs for a long time. We have a lot of warm fuzzy feelings still for Eric Berry. And frankly, the Bob Sutton nightmare is over. I'd be
Yeah.
really interested to know. Like, I wish we had Steve Spagnuolo 3 or 4 years ago, and he'd be using prime Eric Berry in the way that he
Mm,
was using Honey Badger this year. I mean,
keep talking.
I mean, if we had him, even if we had Spags in 2018, I mean, I think we probably win the Super Bowl, right?
Yeah.
Um, I have a hard time believing. I'm not going to tell you I have any personal knowledge of the situation because I'm just a dude. I like to drink beer, love my family,
Rock, flag, and eagle, right, Austin?
right, Taylor? But I would have a hard time believing that Eric Berry would want to come back after the way things ended. But I'd be all for it. I mean, like if he wanted to come back and
But
get a
was it a
ring,
sour ending?
I don't know. I think it was.
I
I don't
don't think it was. I've got so the Chiefs had his back over and over and over and over and over again when they could have, and some teams probably would have cut bait with him sooner than they did, and they always treated him with respect as far as the media department and with all the reverie that was Eric Berry. It was
Yes.
very, very obvious that the Chiefs valued Eric Berry. It just became untenable. It just became the point where he wasn't playing and he was being paid a lot. And anytime a player is not healthy and being paid a lot, he's going to be a casualty.
Yes.
And I think that if I understand the Chiefs front office the way that we do, I can't imagine that they treated him with anything less than exactly the class that he deserved. And I just feel that if he wants to come back, now there was the stuff that came out this offseason that where he said he intentionally took a year off this year.
Right. Sure.
Yeah, yeah, hard to say, but I don't really see Eric Berry being super. You know, I just don't see that being a lie, but maybe it
Yeah.
is. And I do think that if we're looking for secondary help and we are looking for a player of his mold, a veteran player, someone that would mesh well with the locker room and stuff like that. He checks a ton of boxes.
He does.
The big questions would be health and money. The same question that was the reason that we got rid of him in the first place.
Sure.
And if the health checks out and if the money's not bad at all, I mean, there's no reason that they wouldn't want to take a look at him, want
Yeah.
to kick the tires on him. Then you would look at, is another team going to outbid the Chiefs for him or any of that type of stuff. But I just think as a principle, if we're talking about bringing Eric Berry back and he does already check the health box and the money box, I can't imagine anyone being against that move.
Yeah. I agree with that. I think that. Um, I mean, it'll be really interesting to see where he ends up. Regardless, I mean, I don't expect it to be Kansas City, but it'll be interesting to see what his market is like. We'll see in a couple
Yeah.
weeks. I mean, free agency is a mere 6 weeks away, I believe. Maybe not
Oh
even that long. I think it
man,
it might be 5 weeks away now. So
fun!
coming
It's
up,
so much more fun when you have the 2 weeks that
yeah,
that we weren't having to sit there waiting and watching all these other teams play, and it's just the perspective shift on winning the Super Bowl has changed me forever. It's amazing.
forever, and get used to it.
Well, so we've got one other thing I wanted to talk about last season that I was thinking about in training camp. I did quickly want to. There's been something about Andy Reid that's bothered me about his criticism more than the other criticism that I think has been more valid. And
What's that?
the criticism that bothers me these days is his time management criticism.
Yeah,
It's
what is
it's
that?
this old meme. That's basically what it is. It's a remnant of his past self that hasn't been relevant in basically his entire Chiefs tenure, as far as I can tell. And people still make jokes about, oh, if you're going to screw the clock up, get Andy Reid in there, and well, it's Andy Reid, so he's
Yeah,
definitely going to call the timeout to the wrong spot. I never once, and I've paid as close of attention as I think anyone possibly can, and I don't ever remember being like, God, Andy, why can't you be better at clock management? He just timeout wise, like I just think that's been a
yeah.
label that needs to pass on to Kyle Shanahan until further notice.
It does. There's a lot of things that need to be passed on to Kyle Shanahan. He gets to inherit the the
Blow the
calmness.
big lead.
Yeah, right. The blowing the big league crown for sure. The can't win the big one crown. All of those are going to be passed on to Kyle. I agree. I think the one that stands out in my mind, just off the top of my head, was the game at New England, the playoff game at New England, where we were down and
with Alex Smith.
we needed two scores. But exactly with Alex Smith,
Yeah.
like I think it was an Alex Smith problem.
Yeah.
And I love Alex Smith as a person,
Yes.
but we were all tired of him. Well, I don't want to speak for everybody, but
No.
you and I certainly were done with him as the quarterback of the Kansas City Chiefs. And I think I think Pat and Andy really do. You know, one of the things that really it hasn't been talked about as much, but on that mic'd up segment from the Super Bowl, which again, if you haven't watched that,
Mm.
different from Wasp, amazing,
Hmm.
really good. When they get down inside the red zone the first time and they're on 4th and 1, and Andy wanted to kick it,
Hmm.
there's that great segment in the mic'd up where Pat's like, let's go for it. Give me my helmet. Just give me my helmet.
Give
I'm
me
going to
my
go
helmet.
back on the field. Give me my helmet. I'm going to go back on the field. We're going to go for it. Let's go for it. And he just has he's the MVP and he's the best quarterback in the world. So when he just says, we're going for it, and he puts his helmet on and he gets back on the field, and Andy's like, well, shoot, I guess we're going
Andy
for it.
trusts him.
Yeah, and that's an amazing thing. I mean, I really think like that, as much as anything, really is what got us to where we are, which is Andy Reid, Super Bowl winning head coach, right?
Well, and I think I heard you start to say that they cover up each other's weaknesses.
Yes.
That they're such a good fit, not only because they're both good at the same things, but
Yes.
that Pat pushes Andy when he might have otherwise pumped the brakes,
Yep.
and Andy calms Pat down when he might have otherwise gotten a little too excited, and it's just a very simpatico relationship. They
It
just have
is.
they're a football match made in heaven, and that heaven has blessed us with the first of hopefully many Super Bowls.
It certainly has. Taylor,
Yes.
can we talk about John Elway? I've been dying to talk about John Elway this whole podcast. Can we please talk about John Elway?
Yeah, tell me about John Elway.
Taylor, John Elway sucks.
Why does John Elway suck?
John Elway was never actually that good. I want to start with just who John Elway is perceived as being. NFL did their 100 greatest players.
Hmm.
They did this weird thing where they kind of did 10 players from each group, and they did 10 different kinds of groups, right? So they just picked 10 quarterbacks. John Elway was one of the 10 best quarterbacks of all time in this ridiculous exercise. And that gels with a lot of people's perceptions of John Elway, right? They think of John
Certainly.
Elway as being one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. So let's take a trip back just to set the stage here. John Elway, first overall pick in 1983, famously great quarterback class. John Elway, Dan Marino, Jim Kelly, all Hall of Famers.
Todd Blackledge.
Todd Blackledge, infamous in Chiefs lore. But John Elway, as you probably know, his last game in college was against Cal. He lost on the play where the band came on the field. Cal won on this 5 lateral kickoff return. John Elway, in sort of a portent of things to come, sort of previewing his antics at Arrowhead when he asked the refs to calm the crowd down,
Mm.
he was quoted as saying the refs ruined his last game in college. That is a direct quote. So in that
Shout
game,
out to
John
those
Elway,
refs.
yeah, exactly. John Elway had 4th and 17 on his own 13-yard line in that game with 2 minutes to go. He did end up going down, getting the go-ahead score, right? So he put his team in position to win the game. This is kind of where the whole John Elway thing, it's all just a product of myth making, right? It's all about narratives. And even though that narrative didn't work out for him, that's kind of where it all starts. So here's the thing about narratives. They're bullshit.
Total.
Let's
100%.
talk about John Elway in comparison to his peers. Because the thing that you always hear, which is true, is that you can't compare quarterbacks across eras. The
Sure.
NFL is constantly evolving. I want to compare John Elway to the people that played at the same time as John Elway, because I can tell you, compared to those quarterbacks, he still wasn't very good. So let's start with the numbers. John Elway played from 1983 to 1998. That was his career. He played for 16 years. In that time span, there were 19 different quarterbacks that started 100 or more games, including John Elway.
Hmm.
So we're going to look at some numbers here, starting with completion percentage. And I would just want to read off his ranks to you.
Okay.
19 quarterbacks. Those quarterbacks included Dan Marino, Steve Young, Joe Montana, Brett Favre, Jim Kelly, Warren Moon, Troy Aikman, some really good players. Boomer Esiason, he had his moments. You got Ken O'Brien, you got Jeff George. Now we're kind of getting down to the bottom of the barrel. Jim Harbaugh, Bernie Kosar, Bobby Herbert. John Elway in completion percentage ranks 16th out of those 19 quarterbacks.
16 from the bottom or from the top?
He has 16 from the top, 3 from the bottom, so closer to the bottom end. Touchdown percentage, 13th out of 19.
Woof.
Not very good. Still in the bottom half. You're talking about 19 quarterbacks, so the median 50th percentile would be 10th out of 19, right? 9.5 out of 19.
Yeah.
Quarterback rating, 14th out of 19.
14th.
Yeah, 14th.
You're
so
joking.
there weren't 14 quarterbacks that were top 10 quarterbacks of all time playing at the same time as John Elway. That is impossible.
That would be impossible. That's right.
And it is impossible. Yards per attempt, 10th out of 19. So, he's got a middle of the pack there. Sure. Adjusted net yards per attempt, which is taking sacks out of the equation, 11th out of 19.
Geez, now isn't he supposed to have this rocket arm that he should always be throwing bombs down the field? Shouldn't his yards per attempt be the one thing that he has over everyone else?
Yes, and he's playing in an era of bad passing. That's what everybody says is, oh, you can't compare him. We're comparing him to the people that he played with at the same time as him.
Yeah.
Okay, and he wasn't comparable. We're going to talk about why I think that is in a little bit, but I want to just throw some more numbers at you here real quick. So John Elway has 10 more career touchdowns than Warren Moon. We talked about Elway's at 300, Marino at 420, Warren Moon at 290. John Elway had 29 more starts than Warren Moon. So he had 10 more touchdowns. So he finished,
2 more years.
He retired at, when he retired, he had the second most touchdown passes of all time. Okay, well, Warren Moon had 10 fewer touchdown passes, but he played 2 years less. John Elway actually started 2 fewer games than Dan Marino, who threw
100 more touchdowns.
120 more touchdown passes, right? Just an outrageous number of touchdown passes. I want to get into. I did a fun little exercise. I'll let you play a little guessing game here. So I did a little exercise where I took John Elway's career highs. So 16-year NFL career. I pulled out his career high in several different categories.
Okay.
And I want you to tell me where you think that ranks in terms of all the seasons in John Elway's career. So we've got a sample size of 1983 to 1998.
Okay.
We're going to start with touchdown passes. So John Elway's career high in touchdown passes was 27. Doesn't seem very high.
27.
Yeah. So there were, I want you to guess how many seasons of 28 or more touchdown passes there were in the 16 years that John Elway was playing. So everybody who had at least one season better than John Elway's best season throwing touchdowns during his career.
I've got to figure that, and it was the age before, everyone was throwing 30 every year and stuff like that. But I would think, and how many seasons is this that you said?
We're talking about 16 years. 16. I didn't write down the total number of quarterback seasons. I should have done.
Well, that's all right. I would
guess
in 16 years, people going over 28 probably happened an average of 2 to 3 times a year. So
that's
I would think that he's between 32 and 48. That's a big gap, but that's where I'm thinking.
That is an amazing guess, and I love that you showed your work as you were doing that because it is 37 is the answer.
Yes, love it.
There were 37 seasons of 28 or more touchdown passes by 21 different quarterbacks during John Elway's career.
That's trash.
It is trash. And let me just read some names off to you, Taylor.
Yeah, tell me who did it.
Here are the quarterbacks that had a better season with more passing touchdowns than John Elway during John Elway's career. Jeff George did it. Neil Lomax did it.
Yeah, sure, Old Neil.
Eric Kramer did it. Scott Mitchell.
Oh,
Vinny Testaverde did it.
not
Danny
surprised.
Danny White did it.
Danny White, nice.
Y-
There's a name I haven't heard in a long time.
Jeff Blake.
Woo,
Lynn Dickey.
woo.
Jim Everett.
Oh no.
And then actual good quarterbacks.
Yeah, right, right, right,
Dan Marino did it a bunch of times.
right.
Joe Montana did it several times. But those aren't Hall of Fame quarterbacks, Taylor.
No, and they played at the same time he did.
And they played at the same time he did.
So why could they do it and he couldn't do it?
Well, because he wasn't that good. So
Mm,
let's talk about passing yards. This is a fun one. John Elway's career high is 4,030 passing yards.
okay.
So you want to guess again how many seasons you think there were of
How many
more than 4,030 passing
yard
yards?
seasons? So I'm gonna guess fewer than 30 or than 28 touchdowns by about 5. So I'm gonna go with like 32.
Pretty good. 26 is
Ah,
the answer.
more
So
fewer.
again, this is taking John Elway's best season ever, most passing yards in his career, 4,030. 26 times in his career, another quarterback that wasn't John Elway threw for more yards than that.
Than he ever did in his whole
Than he ever
16-year
did
career.
in his whole career. Those include the aforementioned Lynn Dickey, Scott Mitchell, Neil Lomax, Don Majkowski. You ever heard of that guy?
No, and you and I have heard of tons
A
of
lot.
guys.
We have Bill Kinney. Shout out to Bill Kinney,
Yeah,
former Chief.
that's right.
Bill Kinney did it with the Chiefs. Jay Schroeder.
Ooh, I'm pretty sure he's an
Jacksonville.
actor.
He is an actor. We'll get into a really good one here in a minute.
Okay.
Jacksonville Jaguar Mark Brunell did it.
Yeah, of course.
Completion percentage. You don't have to guess on this one. John Elway's career best completion percentage, 63.2. 29 seasons better than that
No.
in his career. Yards per attempt, 7.9 yards per attempt is his career high.
7.9.
Yeah, never broke 8. 29 seasons better than John Elway's career high, including in addition to some of the goofballs that we were talking about earlier, some dude named Wade Wilson.
Oh, that's Daredevil.
Yeah, it's Deadpool, bro. Come on.
Deadpool. I always confuse Deadpool and Daredevil's names. I know them character-wise, but I always say Wade Wilson is Daredevil, and I mean
what is Daredevil?
Matt Murdock.
Okay.
Yeah. Wade Wilson, Matt Murdock. Yeah. It's
for people that are gonna shred Taylor on Twitter. He knows a lot about superheroes.
I do. It is a slip of the tongue that happens almost every time I refer to either Deadpool or Daredevil. I always say the other one. Don't know why.
So Deadpool threw for a higher yards per attempt in a season than John Elway did. Okay.
Wow.
So finally, we're gonna do passer rating. Passer rating isn't a good stat, but like it's not a terrible stat, right? Like the problem with passer rating is you can't take a passer rating from 2020 and compare it to a passer rating from 1985. You can't do that. But what you can do that is instructive is take all the passer ratings from 1985,
compare them to each other. Yes.
And even though it's not a perfect statistic, John Elway, he never had a good passer rating. So in his career, there are 34 seasons better than 93.0 passer rating. He got the usual suspects that we've been talking about. Add in Chris Chandler. Add in Steve Bartkowski.
Yeah, I love Steve Bartkowski.
Add in Tony Eason. 34 different seasons during John Elway's 16-year career where they had a better passer rating than his best passer rating ever.
Man.
So John Elway, I mean, his career best seasons aren't even very good compared to the other quarterbacks he's playing with. And not just the great quarterbacks like Montana and Marino, but the bad ones even would manage a season better than John Elway's career best season.
Yep.
I want to talk about Dan Reeves. I don't know how much you know about Dan Reeves. What do you know about Dan Reeves?
I know that he was the coach that Broncos fans always blame for John Elway's failures.
That is correct. He is the coach that coached John Elway to 3 Super Bowl losses.
Right.
He started as an offensive coordinator with the Cowboys in the late 70s. Roger Staubach, Tom Landry, won a Super Bowl with the Cowboys. And while he was with the Cowboys, his 4 years with the Cowboys, his Cowboys teams ranked in the 91st percentile of scoring offense in the NFL. So
Yeah.
they were better at scoring the football than 91% of NFL teams over those 4 years. Then Dan Reeves gets hired as the head coach of the Broncos, and he takes over John Elway's young career. And I've had a lot of Broncos fans tell me that Dan Reeves is the reason that John Elway was producing these very pedestrian numbers.
I've certainly heard that.
Well, John Elway supposedly is a Hall of Fame GOAT quarterback. So, he came from one Hall of Fame GOAT quarterback in Roger Staubach, who was scoring at a very high rate. And then he takes over John Elway, and they were ranked 54th percentile in offensive points per game, despite having Taylor supposedly one of the 10 best quarterbacks of all time.
So what's the difference between Roger Staubach and John Elway?
I guess that Roger Staubach is a good quarterback, and John Elway
that's
is
what I was
not.
wondering. Okay, that makes sense.
Let's talk about Dan Reeves' post-Broncos career.
The old Falcons run.
Yes, the Atlanta Falcons. In 1998, travel back in time with me. Dan Reeves was coaching the Atlanta Falcons, and his quarterback that year was a dude named Chris Chandler. Are you familiar with Chris
I'm
Chandler?
slightly familiar with Chris Chandler,
Okay.
but please enlighten me.
So Chris Chandler was 33 years old that year. He started 152 games in his NFL career, and his career record was 67-85.
Woof.
Woof indeed. In 1998, he started 14 games, and he goes 13-1. So if you take that year out, his career record was 54-83. Yes. So this is his second season with Dan Reeves, the guy who is responsible for John Elway being a turd for most of his Denver career. And here's what Chris Chandler, in his second season with Dan Reeves, this is what he was able to do. His completion percentage that year was a 58.1%. If you were to push that over into John Elway world, that would be John Elway's seventh highest completion percentage of his career.
Out of 16 years.
Out of 16
Way to go,
years.
Chris Chandler.
His yards per attempt was 9.6. John Elway's career high, you may recall, was 7.9.
Man.
So Chris Chandler blew him out of the water.
He was dropping dimes.
His touchdown percentage was 7.6. Elway's career high was 6.2.
Woo!
His touchdowns, he threw 25 touchdowns that year. And Elway's career high was 27. So, okay, good for you, John.
Yeah.
John also threw 26 touchdowns twice. Problem is, John Elway in those seasons had 502, 466, and 542 pass attempts, respectively. Chris Chandler in 1998 threw 25 touchdowns on 327 pass attempts.
Wow.
And by the way, all three of those seasons that John Elway threw 26, 26, and 27 touchdowns were under Mike Shanahan, who is the original system QB coach.
Yeah.
We just saw his son with the same system take Jimmy frickin' Garoppolo to the Super Bowl, all right, and make Jimmy Garoppolo look like a good quarterback. Those 3 years of John Elway's career, at the very tail end of his career, those were better than his performances under Dan Reeves, which obviously wasn't Dan Reeves' fault, since he was able to take Chris Chandler to the Super Bowl in the NFC, posting better numbers than John Elway ever did in the exact same system.
Wow.
But Mike Shanahan gets a hold of Elway at the end of his career, gives him those 3 career bests and touchdowns. With Dan Reeves, Elway's career high in touchdown passes was 22.
Ugh.
And
Can you
finally,
imagine that being your quarterback? Not my quarterback.
I can't. And in fact, 22, I mean, we had a pretty pathetic franchise touchdown record for a long time.
Yeah, we did.
But it was Len Dawson who set the record, like, when was it, 1969, 1970? And that was the record until 2018, which is a little embarrassing. But old Lenny Dawson threw more touchdowns than John Elway did in any season of his career, and he was back in the old AFL.
Yeah, he was.
He was slinging it.
Worse passing era than John Elway, and he was 10 times the quarterback John Elway was.
He was 10 times the quarterback John Elway was. So why is it that John Elway, why is he so highly regarded?
You know
I have
why?
some theories about this, but you tell me. You go.
I think it's all the freaking helicopter dive.
Yes.
I think that when he dove in the Super Bowl, I think people thought, Oh my God, that is what a all-time GOAT quarterback would have done, and they just blinded themselves to the 16 years of tape that he had put out, and they just said that he just wills his team to win. I think if he never makes that run, his legacy is different.
You're completely right. And I think that is at the crux of what John Elway's goatdom is all about. It's all about moments and it's
Mhm,
about narratives.
mhm.
And especially in the 80s and the 90s, back when things were real crude, football was real crude. Those were what mattered. Those were the things that got played on the clip shows that you saw. I mean, there's probably one clip show, right? I mean, it
Yeah,
was on ESPN. You know, you'd see the Super Bowl, you'd watch the Super Bowl on the networks. The big games, those were what you watched because you couldn't just stream everything for free. And those were the things that people wrote about in newspapers. Remember those?
yeah,
John
barely. I heard
Elway,
about him.
yeah, John Elway, aside from the couple of Super Bowls he won in the last 2 years of his career with Mike Shanahan, he's famous for something called the drive, which was a game-winning 98-yard touchdown drive against
Against the Browns.
the Cleveland Browns.
Man.
Imagine somebody. I mean, so Patrick Mahomes just in this playoff run
Mhm.
had 3 double-digit comebacks. John Elway had 2 double-digit comebacks in the playoffs in his entire career.
Jeez.
And yet,
He's the comeback guy.
he's the comeback guy. He's got the drive, the drive. It's just manufactured hype. It's nonsense.
You're cracking eggs of wisdom.
So here's I am cracking eggs of wisdom. I'll tell you what. Here's what happened. I'm just going to close with this. This is how John Elway became John Elway. It's the moments, it's the narratives, and it's also the fact that John Elway played for 16 years.
Yeah.
Okay, John Elway came along in this magical point in football history where like people didn't play that long until John Elway and Marino came along. They both played for a very long time, and now obviously we've gotten into Breeze and Brady and Rivers, and everybody's playing into their 40s. Um,
Right.
but back then, that was not the case. Uh, when John Elway retired, he had the second most quarterback starts in NFL history. He had 231 starts. He's 8 behind Fran Tarkenton, who of course
Old
played in a
Fran.
completely different era. And so he, old Fran didn't have the touchdown numbers. He didn't have the counting stats. Dan Marino was at 229 games. And then in fourth place in quarterback starts was Warren Moon, who had 202.
Jeez.
And no
So
one
John Elway
else,
was just ancient.
he was. And he had, so no one else, fifth place, had 180 quarterback starts.
Jeez.
So John Elway in second place had 50 more starts than the quarterback with the fifth most starts of all time.
That is a huge gap.
So he played a lot. He played longer than almost anybody, and he just put up a lot of counting stats. So when John Elway retired, he had the second most touchdown passes. Now, mind you, he was like 100 touchdown passes behind Dan Marino,
Sure.
who played the exact same number of games at the
Hmm.
exact same period of
Hmm.
time. They were drafted the exact same year. But people say,
Strange.
oh, John Elway, second most touchdown passes all time. He must have been a GOAT. And John Elway, unlike Dan Marino, did end up winning 2 Super Bowls. John
Mm.
Elway also finished with more wins than Dan Marino did.
And that's the rub. QB
And
wins.
that's the rub. It's ridiculous. That's how we ended up with John Elway, top 10 quarterback of all time, NFL 100, over, by the way, Drew Brees, which is just insane,
Asinine.
laughable, asinine, ridiculous. It's, you know what it is?
It's preposterous.
It's preposterous. It
God.
is, dude. It is. It's preposterous.
John Elway. Love to trash him.
He sucked. The end.
Love it. Well, Austin, we have enlightened the people.
We have.
We've answered their questions.
We have.
We've let them know why John Elway sucks. We brought him back in time to the training camp and our mindset back before we knew what kind of run we were about to go on. Think it's a good inaugural first episode of It's Always Sunny in Chiefs Kingdom. Anything else you got on your chest you got to let out?
I think we pretty much covered it. I think we've done a pretty good job. You know, a little yeah. I think we talked some football. We gave the people
Football.
what they wanted.
Run out and
You
hook
know,
in.
run out and hook in. We're doing this podcast for you because of your harassment and your love for the Kansas City Chiefs.
That's right. Yep, and we don't have any Donovan McNabb impersonators, but we're trying to get one. So when we
That's the
get
guy from
him,
the Cosby Show.
that's Tiger Woods. Well, folks, I'm Taylor.
I'm Austin.
It's Always Sunny in Chiefs Kingdom.